Gonna get started. I would ask everyone to take their seats, and let's get started. Uh, Next on the agenda, we have the issue of a licensor hardship exemption, and we have Governor Couch and Chief Garcia who are here to talk about it.
Thank you all. I'm going to let Chief Garcia give details on this, but I want to give a little background on this first. And our hope leaving out of this is a general consensus among governors that yes, we should write up the bylaw change. Yes, we should do the fiscal impact analysis, the equity analysis, and bring that back to all of you for a first and second read. The good news is this proposal is very straightforward. We've talked about it a little bit already and gone over this. It comes from historically, there has been for I don't know how long, but for quite some time at least, a hardship exemption that people can apply for their bar dues. The original proposal or the original system was if you in the prior year had made 200% of the federal poverty level or less, you could apply for a hardship exemption by confirming that you'd made that, met that requirement and not have to pay bar dues for that year. You were allowed to do that once. In 2020, under the leadership of past president, then treasurer Dan Clark, they said, hey, we should probably extend this to 2 years and see what happens. As part of that memo, they also said, this is the first step in us investigating what changing that limit does. And you should come back to this and relook at this again and see if this was a useful thing to increase the limit from 1 to 2. And then, to my knowledge, we all forgot about that. I admittedly was not part of it, but we all forgot about it. And then I have to give credit to Nancy Clark at a meeting was talking about, should we have some sort of like medical exemption for people who are dealing with medical issues? And when I spoke with Chief Garcia about that, she said, we have a lot of these exemptions, and the idea came up around, military or medical. Like, why do we have so many exemptions? Why don't we just cut to the chase here and say, if you're having a hardship, we can create an exemption for you? And so to kind of test that theory, again, to follow the proposal that was set up by the board in 2020, we decided what's the next phase in testing the expansion of this hardship exemption. We went from 1 to 2. We saw a drastic increase in 2020 of people, requesting a second exemption. Could that have been because of the 2021? Could that have been because of the pandemic? Could that have become because there was latent demand for that? We don't really know, but we did see after that it stabilized back to relatively normal rates with about 30 a year, 35 a year on average, requesting a second exemption. But the overall exemption is kind of staying relatively steady with a slight increase. So the proposal before you now is twofold. One, let's keep testing that expansion and say, what if instead of 2 times in your career, you could request the hardship exemption 3 times and see what happens? The other part of that is saying, instead of 200% of the federal poverty level, what if we look at the ALICE metric, what's known as its asset limited, income constrained, employed. It's people who are living in, it's a number that tries to calculate people living in effective poverty. And in Washington, that is around 2.7 times the federal poverty level, or 270% of the federal poverty level. So the 2 proposals in this are to, 1, increase the exemption from 2 times in your career to 3 times in your career, and to change the metric from 200% of the federal poverty level to 270% of the federal poverty level. We haven't done the full fiscal analysis on this, but I wanted to kind of give some concept of what these numbers are. We can assume that you're going to have an increase in people requesting this. I think you can assume that you're probably going to at least add a dollar per member to the bar dues by doing this, or use a dollar per member of bar dues to offer this exemption to people, I think is a safe assumption to make right now. But when we're talking about this money, we are not talking about a lot of money. It might say like 270% of the federal poverty level. You might say like, that's livable, right? That is about $42,000 per year for a single person. Not a lot of money. I did some numbers on this for fun, and not to pick on Moses Lake, but the average rent in Moses Lake is about $19,000 annually. So I was trying to pick a place that was not Seattle, right? Like, let's look at that. The average grocery bill in Washington is about $15,000 annually. So that means that if we use that 200% metric, that's $30,000. So someone who has rent in Moses Lake and groceries is already $4,000 over that requirement, right? So we're asking them to then pay bar dues as well. If they're paying groceries, and rent in Moses Lake, and now we're adding bar dues onto that when they're already negative $4,000 in the hole. That's a serious number. So this Alice metric, the 270% raises that to about $42,000 for a single person. So we're really not talking about people who are doing well. We're talking about people who are living in effective poverty. One other note on this, just to kind of give some extra context around numbers. We don't have good Washington data on this, but the bottom 10% of lawyers in the United States make about $70,000. So even like the bottom 10%, even looking nationally, we're talking about people making about $70,000. So this Alice metric is still people below that. It is truly people experiencing a hardship for one reason or another, and this is a change that would help alleviate things for those people. Did anything to add to that? No? Okay. Yeah. Questions, feedback? Yeah.
Governor Rathbone.
Just very active. Moses Lake and Ephrata are very active at this meeting. I have one. Is this is the first read, or if it's being brought back on from a I guess I'm just a little bit confused.
This came up, I think, in a roundtable and at the Budget and Audit Committee. This is not a first read. We do not have the bylaw change. The bylaw change will be relatively straightforward, but this is before we do the work on the fiscal analysis, the equity analysis, we wanted to kind of make sure like we're all rowing with the same boat. And if we have that approval, it'll come back for the first read. And hopefully the first read and the second read is not a big change on this one, because the bylaw change is really like you change the number 2 to 3, you change the number 200 to 270. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying. And then this is more of a semantics thing, because when I was reviewing the materials for this, I was thinking to myself, how hard it would be for a lawyer to think about even making this request. And so I was thinking, this is just my thought, but instead of exemption, calling it a scholarship or something of that nature, where it has the language of, yes, it's need-based, but I guess I try to put myself in the shoes of an attorney who would have to make this request. And I'm not saying, I can't speak for everyone, but I just think that the language, if we could shift it a little bit to make it more of a grant versus a reduction. So those are my thoughts.
Chief Nagowski.
I'm speaking for our literal voiceless ED, who said, in considering this, rather than create huge categories and exemptions for people who may or may not need this, that there is something preferable to provide exemption for those that really need them. And maybe to Mary's point, this is something where you're asking people to opt in, and I think they would probably take it seriously. And isn't that a nicer way to approach this, rather than trying to say, we're just going to start throwing broad categories of exemptions out there in case you may be in there. So I think it's a good targeted approach.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions or comments? I'm sorry.
I see.
Governor Dresden.
I think it's a great proposal. Thank you, Jordan, for bringing this to the board. I see some possible recommendations, and I'm just kind of wondering, like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for debate on this, or like, do you have because it sounds like it's more specific, and you're just.
Yeah, we did the possible recommendations already through the budget and audit. We talked about this with roundtable. So it is kind of, it's nice. It's just really, I think I am looking for, like, my hope is if we do the research on this and the fiscal analysis and the equity analysis, that unless something wild comes out of that has me questioning what we're doing, we're all kind of like rolling with the same stream moving forward, because I don't want to have the state bar invest that time if we're not all thinking like, yes, let's do this right now. And so really what I'm looking for is, are there good ideas of like things we can do to maybe make this more equitable, make it more inclusive, or is it feedback like we have a general consensus, like let's go get it done, get us first read at the next meeting?
Yes, good question. Do we dare do a straw poll?
Or we could just say, speak now and forever hold your peace.
Yeah, exactly. Governor Bloom.
I think this, generally, I don't have any heartache with exemptions with folks who are struggling to make it, but I got to wonder if we've got such a lack of public defenders doesn't that pay more than $42,000 a year? And I mean, it's like a mismatch. You know, we've been seeing things where we've got, hardships making it. I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how do you get yourself into a position where you can only make $42,000 a year and you're admitted to practice law? And I get it. Maybe you do an area where it's, low bono, or you've got, a lot of really, fee constraints. You've got cases that are, contingent and they get extended or whatever, things like that. I mean, I mean, it's not inconceivable. And you can clearly see that, there can be a blips. I mean, 2021 was a huge blip on the number. And so clearly, economics, the overall economic situation plays into the factor, but it's just hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, unless it's, part of the year, you've only employed part of the year, you've got some other kind of things going on. But, when we've got, prosecutors, offices who don't have enough prosecutors, and defense, public defense, needs, it just seems kind of hard to fathom. But and maybe there's a kind of clearinghouse or opportunity to try and, address those folks. I mean, when they apply, and see if there's, some member engagement or benefit, member advancement that could kind of help, resolve those situations for folks who are in that kind of hardship situation. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to be in a position where you're saying, well, we get 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, maybe we lift it to 4 years now or whatever. But it's like, hey, it's unsustainable, folks. Maybe you ought to find something else to do besides practice law. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to fathom. So anyway.
I'm going to recognize Governor Arneson. Sorry. Yeah, no, I get it.
Sorry,
Governor Arneson, Nancy Hawkins, Governor Couch. If you want to,
I was going to answer that question.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
fine. Then you can just jump in and do that,
So no, I think to answer your question, we don't
Christine.
ask people to tell us like exactly what happened to them, but you can see trends like 2020 global pandemic. People were laid off all over. That was a serious hardship. People weren't going for legal services, but it is, it is hard to imagine what happens there, and that's why it's about 0.2% of our membership, right? Like this does not happen often. This does not happen to a lot of people, but one example is people can deal with medical conditions that take them off work for a long time, or they have family members who have medical issues. Like most of these things are temporary, and part of what we want to see with this is how much of it is transient, how much of it is. And if you look at the data right now, most of the exemptions are first-time exemptions that are requested. It is a 1-year thing typically. We see some people every year that request a second exemption. We're curious to see what will happen with those numbers, with the third time, and kind of track, are there systemic issues that are lasting, or is this like you had a blip 1 year, you got it fixed, you had a blip 2 years, you got it fixed, it took a little longer. And so this helps us see that data. But generally what we see is it's a small percentage of people, and usually it is a one-time something went wrong, some hardship existed.
I think Governor Arneson, then Nancy Hawkins, and then Governor Larry.
Thank you. I was just going to kind of respond a little too on the things that I think of that could bring someone to this position. I've known people who had serious health issue, or spouse has a serious health issue and they have to go part-time for a year, half-time, something like that. It's not always just that they're, solo or small firm and just not making it. There's lots of other things. I also think about, all of our federal colleagues who recently lost jobs that they didn't expect to be losing, and may not have the money to keep their license current. And that, hopefully won't, but could happen statewide too. And imagine if we had several hundred AAGs that suddenly found themselves in that position. So I think there's a lot of reasons. I wish it were so simple to be able to say, we have these people who want to do work and we have these jobs, and can't we match them? Gosh, it would be so nice if it was that simple. I wish we could, but systems don't necessarily work that way. So I just wanted to kind of, share some things that I have seen, that I know of folks who have found themselves in that position through no fault of their own. So thank you.
Nancy Hawkins.
My response and my comments are, I'm trying to be calm while I say them. But the vast majority of lawyers in this state that are members of the Bar Association do not work for big firms where if they get sick or their spouse gets sick, they can just go on their firm's short-term disability policy, or they've got a health savings account, and so all is well. And it's not because they're smarter than everyone else, it's they got on a certain career path. And, 20, 30 years later, they have a nice, fancy path. But there are plenty of us who took a different path. I became a family law lawyer representing low-income victims, often of domestic violence, people who couldn't afford a lawyer, but maybe I took the case for $100 a month. I've had people pay me $100 a month for years. And I have people who try to do that for a while and then fail and never pay. And it's not because I'm stupid and didn't choose the right path, or I'm not a good lawyer. And there are plenty of people who did things like me. $42,000 some years sounds like a lot of money, because I had plenty of years where I didn't earn $42,000. And I never had a year where I earned, $250,000 or $400,000. An organization that is supposed to be working on equity and justice issues needs to be more understanding of what the average person's income is. We heard about Grant County, and they're not out there, killing their own cows for their food or anything like that. They earn less money, and they're still paying the same cost for groceries probably, and gasoline. So we have to be a little more careful. My original idea for this hardship was, and the other thing, you can't make a decision. So you have some personal crisis. Your spouse gets cancer and you have to be their care provider, or you get sick. You can't say, oh, well, I guess I can't maintain my solo practice anymore. I'll go get a government job. As we've heard, those are getting a little harder to keep. But, nobody wants to hire somebody that immediately is going to say they're not available. So people get themselves in financial trouble through no fault of their own. And we need to be aware of that and sympathetic to it. But, the other thing that happens is, and we can all say, well, it's only $400, it's only $500. And I totally get that. I've always paid my dues, full amount, never requested a hardship. But I don't criticize the people that do. But things happen, and it doesn't matter if the year before you made $125,000. If the particular year that, when you have to pay your dues, that's when your husband's in the hospital or you're in the hospital, the hardship needs to be based on what's your present situation, not what was it last year. So, I'm not sure there's a way you write that to base it on some national standard. And in some ways it has to be the executive director or somebody just makes a decision that, this person is experiencing a hardship, let's give them a break. And as we've seen, there aren't that many people that ask for it, because in fact dues aren't that high. But for the ones that do, let's have a little grace. It's not easy to ask for a break. Those people that are asking, they're putting themselves out there for this organization. The least we can do is be sympathetic to their needs. So, thanks.
Thank you. Governor Larry, then Governor Rathbone, then Governor Villeneuve.
I just want to echo what Governor Arneson and Nancy Hawkins said. It's not our job to judge or disparage those who need it. But I also did have a question. For household, do we have like a definition of what that is? I don't want someone who's like living with roommates and maybe that plays into their household, or living with parents on a fixed income or something like that. What household actually entails.
Yeah, we're using like the federal poverty metrics for that. And so the federal poverty level defines household. And I believe it is based on like actual family, not just like dependents. Yeah. So yeah, that's how household is defined. Same way it's defined for tax purposes, I believe.
Governor Rathbone.
I just have one question, and it might be related to this, might not. It also might be a foundation, legal foundation question, but do we offer the ability for any firms to, and this would be a few steps ahead, but if we called it scholarships for firms to sponsor, have we looked into that? Is that something that would be related to this? Or I guess it's something I'm thinking, right, is if there are entities out there who wanted to sponsor it, if it was coined as a scholarship, I guess is my thought. And I had one more thing, but should we just move to straw poll this unless after Governor Arneson speaks?
I mean, I'm open. Obviously, we're
We don't
free.
have, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. It's Governor Villeneuve.
Governor Villeneuve, then President-elect Adewale.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my comment was just to reinforce what Ms. Hawthorne said, which is I do believe having a different name would be very useful.
No.
We're trying to help.
Governor Villeneuve, we're having a
yeah.
hard time hearing you. I think your
Okay.
connection is a
Can you
little
hear me?
unstable.
Yeah.
Now
Can
we
you hear me
can,
now?
yes.
Yes,
Okay.
now we can.
So my point was just, I really love this notion of having a better name for this program. And I think that one of the issues is we're trying to do a better access for justice overall. And we have these access, and just the word justice keeps coming back. I think it might be wise to try and overlap those two things and maybe call this program some type of access to justice effort.
Thank you, Governor Villeneuve. President-elect Adewale.
I want to encourage Board of Governors to try on this issue as well as on some of the issues we discussed yesterday to try to bring this issue up at members' engagement. It really helps to get input from members' engagement, have a much more robust discussions at Member Engagement Council. That's what council is set up for, to get, if it's on the agenda, there is more opportunity for members to be able to engage and have a very fruitful discussions over there. It's my suggestions. I believe Governor Dresden and I really make use of the Members Engagement Council to help ventilate members' concerns about issues like this. But more importantly, this is a budget and audit related concern. That's budget and audits. We can't have an exhaustive discussion given the time we always have in board meetings. But when we engage in subcommittees, in committees level, we get much broader perspective, and we have much more robust discussions that is much more meaningful and helpful. So this is going to be my encouragement to you to please consider having some of these issues engage in committees discussions, because you're not going to get a whole lot at the board meetings, because basically we just vote here and minds. You know, we can make one or two improvements to the bills, but you get much more robust discussions, because if this is on Member Engagement Council, you will have at least 15 more minutes or thereabout on the agenda to discuss it. So that's my my 2 cents.
Thank you, President-elect Adewale. But I want to ask the folks who brought this to us, is there, I understand this is not for action right away. I guess I would ask a question. What do you want to have happen with this?
Yeah, I just want to also note that this issue has already been discussed extensively at Budget and Audit in October and
Thank you.
January.
Yeah, great.
I will say I think I've gotten feedback on this, and I think I have some good ideas. And I think Hannah and I are going to discuss kind of some of these proposals, and I think you'll see changes in this reflected when this does come before you. Straw polls are bad luck for me, so I think I'm good. I think I'm able to read a room, and so I think I'm good right now. I think I have feedback. I think I have an understanding. I think I have vibes that I can look to and bring this back. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
fantastic.
Yeah, good ideas that it will be.
Governor Couch, yes. Governor Couch, we will look forward to you bringing it back. Next, we have Governor Bloom and then Governor Ahern.
Yeah, I appreciate perspectives and certainly the comments of Nancy Hawkins as well as a number of others, Emily and Christina on the subject. As a cancer survivor, I've encountered personal hardships and understand how difficult it is to humble oneself to approach the board or the organization about an exemption and this type of thing. I've never done it, but I could certainly understand and sympathize. And I did not want to leave the impression that I'm, an elitist, I think, or what's the, and that this is a serious and issue that's deserving of our consideration. So I appreciate Governor Couch and
Thank you, Governor Bloom, and Governor Ahern.
One quick suggestion following up on the access to justice point. I would like to see when this comes back, you all at least thinking about this being, frankly, part of, equity and justice. And it's not a DEI thing. It's an equity and justice thing, which is what we are really gunning for. And I think this fits in very well for that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments or questions? I really want to thank Chief Garcia and Governor Couch. I think we had a great discussion here.
Thank you.
And we look forward to you coming back.